I've said it before. I didn't even know engineering was a thing, and YouScience results said I should have been an engineer.
There's still time, Alli. There's still time.
That's one of YouScience's biggest goals, is to help expose students to things that they didn't know, but also what they don't want to do. That they might have been interested in this, and then after going through a work-based learning activity, to say, "Oh, I'm not interested in that."
That's the purpose of work-based learning. How are we developing out those experiences for students? And it cannot be contained classrooms. It cannot be a hope that they'll just discover it and figure it out and walk up to a business and introduce themselves. Like, that's not how it works. So if we think about what the purpose of work-based learning is, truly, it's about bringing hope to students.
You're listening to the Disrupt Education podcast, powered by YouScience. Here are your hosts, Peter Hostrawser and Alli Dahl.
Welcome to this episode of Disrupt Education. I am Peter Hostrawser. That is Alli Dahl. And Alli, I heard you made your chickens mad. So I'm going to start there.
Yeah, well, it's springtime and the sun is out more, and it's warmer than the Minnesota winters. And so they did not appreciate me putting them away when it was sunny, and they let me know that. They get very vocal, and some of them are particularly mad. Like, they have like a mad chicken face. They also have like a happy chicken face, things you didn't know about chickens. Yeah.
That's it. Can you hear them? Are they in the background? I guess you can hear them.
They've settled down. I could hear them for like a good 10 minutes after I put them away. I know. It's like a little heartbreaking though, because that's like, I'm sorry.
So here's how I'm going to transition this. I'm always a crazy transitioner when we go into a podcast, and I can see that our guests are kind of laughing because they never know what's going to happen. But when you put your chickens away, sometimes we need to put maybe some old school education away and start talking a little bit more about work-based learning and how it becomes an actionable step, and the rest of the stuff is just in a cage. How about that? Does that sound pretty good?
Yeah.
I guess it's not. We've got a few awesome guests today. We've got one returning guest and a new guest. We have Kristy Volesky with us and Brian Hansen. Welcome, you two. How are you doing?
Fantastic. And I love that connection.
So, I have a whole list of things to do and connect with Alli's chickens. So she always like sets it up pretty well. And then once we get into summer, it's all about skydiving. So it's like, okay, that's pretty cool. So, but Kristy, if you don't mind reintroducing yourself, I know if you're an avid listener of the Disrupt Education podcast, you know who Kristy is. And then Brian will talk about you and YouScience. So Kristy, yeah, go ahead.
Well, back again, time number 4, I believe. And I come from a plethora of experience from the ground level all the way up from a bigger perspective. Started out as a practitioner, as a CTE business teacher turned work-based learning coordinator, went to the State Department of Education, helped oversee the progress of programs at CTE, work-based learning, and business education for the state of Iowa, for schools and colleges across the state, got involved nationally, started helping with ecosystem development with work-based learning, program development for schools, colleges, organizations, and communities across the nation. And I do this work now independently, working for myself, but continuing to help progress the field for the benefit of our students.
Absolutely. And I will say that we have worked with her at our district. Amazing people. You haven't done much, actually. No. Oh my gosh. You like all kinds of levels. So awesome stuff. Brian Hansen, welcome. It's great to have you here. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, man?
Yeah, thanks, Pete. Yeah, I've been working in software for like the last 20 years in a couple different industries. I worked in finance and e-commerce, but most recently worked in ed tech, and that's been my favorite so far. So recently, for the last 4.5, almost 5 years now, I've been working for YouScience, and then worked on several of the different products in the YouScience BrightPath family. And then most recently, we launched in August of last year, we launched our new work-based learning, the second iteration of our work-based learning product that we're pretty proud of.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, welcome. Alli, I know you got to fire off a ginormous question here, and it is not a calculus test, so we'll put everybody at ease, but the floor is yours.
Well, okay, I did want to. This is the pre-setup.
Okay.
So if you don't follow James Clear, he's an author of a pretty famous book called Atomic Habits. He also has a newsletter that I subscribe to, and he has some good quotes in it. And this one came just last week, and I was like, wow, the timing could not be more perfect. So it says, and it's from him, it's rare to find your purpose for life, so instead look for your purpose for this season. What lights you up right now? What's a good thing to dedicate this season of your life to? Perhaps more importantly, what purpose served you well in your previous season, but you have outgrown? Life is always changing. It's okay to pick a new North Star.
Mm.
And I was like, wow, this would have been such a helpful framework for me when I was a young person. Because kids are like, they're really in a season of life, and we need to honor that. And so, when we talk about like schools and they're saying they're preparing students for the future, the question is like, are they? And how could they do it better? And like, and if they don't ever experience like, I don't know, seasonality, if they just do school, then like, what are we preparing them for? So I don't think students should just graduate with a diploma. I think they need to be ready and connected for what's next. So with that, Kristy, at a high level, okay, why is work-based learning more essential than ever before? And what actually changes for students when they move from career awareness into work-based learning, like real world experience?
I think 2026 with work-based learning, because work-based learning as a term has been around for a decade, maybe a little bit more. And I think that anytime you have some sort of new term or initiative, especially in education, it tends to get watered down over time because people forget to, like, they forget the initial intent or the purpose for work-based learning. So before diving into maybe all the different components, why work-based learning? Why are we doing work-based learning? Why even have it? And I'm going to share some links that you can add for viewers and listeners if they want to read some more. But if we really dive into and reflect on what is the purpose of work-based learning, like why did it come about? And the purpose of work-based learning, I'm going to say, is four different things. The most obvious one that we always latch on to is skills, not just the professional, transferable, or durable skills, whatever you want to call them, but it's also the technical skills. And a lot of times in career and tech ed, we latch on to if we just develop skills and students with skills, we're good. Not true. It has to be more than that. The second big thing that has come about in the last 2 years, it was released in 2024, some research about social capital and how important those connections are for students to really see what's possible. Meaning, and I know I've said it on this podcast before, you cannot be what you cannot see. How can you dream and figure out what comes next if you don't have the connections? And then the third thing has to do with being able to access careers that are typically inaccessible. This is something that has truly fallen off the cliff. We're seeing too many who are focused on the check marks and what's easiest and maybe what they did in the 90s, the 80s, the 50s. Going to say it with a little sass there, that it's just go send a kid out to a part-time job, meaning we'll say it's loosely related. Oh, they're interested in culinary and they're working at a fast food. Is that really something that a student couldn't access on their own? The answer is no, it's not. The purpose of work-based learning is to connect them with something that they wouldn't normally be able to access. Because again, going back to number two, when it comes to social capital, how are we increasing opportunities for students? And then finally, it's really about cultivating talent for the community. The idea of economic development, I know it's really starting to catch on in CTE, and we're talking about it, but I don't know that we're fully talking about it in the right way. Sometimes when it comes to work-based learning and student opportunity, we're still connecting it to filling jobs. That's not what we need. We know that with AI and the ever-changing needs of our community, that we're going to need talent that doesn't exist or companies that don't exist in our community yet. How are we cultivating talent for the future of our community? So really, when we start looking at it, that's the purpose of work-based learning.
Yeah.
How are we developing out those experiences for students? And it cannot be contained classrooms. It cannot be a hope that they'll just discover it and figure it out and walk up to a business and introduce themselves. Like, that's not how it works. So if we think about what the purpose of work-based learning is, truly, it's about bringing hope to students. It's opening doors that they wouldn't normally have. And if we're not opening those doors intentionally, if we're not bridging those gaps throughout their entire academic careers, are we just shutting the door on that? So I think that comes back to, if that's the purpose of work-based learning, how are we introducing students to opportunities? How are we scaffolding that opportunity? How are we building on and off ramps as students explore and discover themselves? As you just mentioned, the seasons of their lives. I mean, if I think about my own personal journey, and I had the fortune of going to a school district where they had lots of different opportunities for us to engage, I changed my mind throughout that. So then how are we encouraging that today? It's almost disheartening to hear that we have reduced opportunities in an effort to contain students in a classroom and just develop out those skills and test and assess. But it has to be more than that. Introducing, building, expanding opportunities for students.
You see, Alli, this is why Kristy Volesky is awesome to work with. I mean, she's just starting a new work-based learning masterclass here. I'm just telling you, this is awesome. I want to get into the guts a little bit, and I know we're going to unpack those. So thank you, Kristy, kind of setting the stage. But Brian, you're a director of product management for YouScience, and one of the things that I really want to understand on your side of things when you're diving into the research, and then you put it to kind of the boots on the ground pieces. What you said 2.0, which is interesting. So you're iterating, you're learning. What are you learning? What are you learning about work-based learning aptitudes through the Bright Path and everything that you're working on now? Like, what do you see happening to students in schools?
Yeah, it really was fascinating to transfer my what I had from before, which was in a different company, Mastery Learning, and then with YouScience, with the career aptitudes and the certifications that we have, to transition all of that into work-based learning. So YouScience purchased a company which focused on work-based learning in 2022, and that was our first iteration into work-based learning. So we took all of the best pieces of that software and incorporated them into BrightPath. But in doing so, we wanted to get out and talk to some teachers and counselors, administrators, or WBL coordinators and find out what their their pain points were. And it was interesting to hear that work-based learning is, although it's integrated with the education system, it also has the unique facet to be coordinated with employers as well. And they have a totally different agenda, So talking to the coordinators who sit right in between both of those, it was interesting to hear that they do so much paperwork. So much paperwork in between with what they have to do for the employer, they have to do for the students, what they have to do for the district, for the state, all of the compliance pieces, and helping track down all of those pieces. It would usually come to some point, I would ask them, well, how do you do that now? And they just shrug their shoulders and say, I don't know, spreadsheets, and they were a bit sheepish about it, but there's nothing to be ashamed of there. They pull it all together somehow and have it in all these different spreadsheets. So it was exciting to put together a piece of software that could consolidate all of that for them, help make their job a lot easier and more efficient, and get the right students into the right placement, which also means a lot.
I know it's a huge part of your role, Peter, like with internships at Naperville. Mm-hmm. And Kristy, you've seen this type of, like I'm sure in your work with work-based learning, and I mean far before that as well, is that's a huge, it's a huge limitation, right? Like I'm thinking chemistry, like that's a rate limiting step, which is basically a fancy way of saying it's a bottleneck, and it will prevent more students having access to opportunities like that, right? Like the thing I think about in the AI age and, in a technologically robust age is how can it support teachers and this type of work. And, we had Chris Bryda on not that long ago talking about boundary spanning. And, Brian, you're talking really about that director, that teacher is spanning industry and the school, and they're having to really make a lot of negotiations. And if you have something in the middle that can, I don't know, like referee or like help, then that makes a big difference. Kristy, okay, like if people don't know this, whatever. Kristy and I are friends, and we talk a lot. But like we talk a lot about it's work-based learning, social capital, like how to best help students. Like our conversations are very much like, I mean, I have signed copies of her books. Okay, people, just in case you're wondering. So I always have questions for Kristy. And I was actually really, really fascinated when you introduced me to the research on social capital. And like when Peter and I were thinking about this spring and like what was a topic that needed to be addressed on the podcast, it was work-based learning in the realm of social capital. Because it's just like, as you were saying, Kristy, you're like, this stuff is relatively new. It's kind of gotten watered down already. Like, people are trying to make sense of it. So it's like, how does that fit into this work? And how does understanding social capital like help us get better access to work-based learning and just experiences for kids?
Right. So some of the research that I've shared with you that, again, I'll make sure that the links are available to listeners. And the one I really like is OECD, which is based out of Paris, and they review different countries, which I think gives us really good insight into different ecosystems based off of socioeconomic status. And even some of the most advanced European countries still struggle with social capital, but they were trying to pinpoint what it was. And so there was a study that Nature had done where they had really dug into economic connectedness and how does it relate to social capital and socioeconomic status. And what they discovered was that high school was this pivotal moment where students either were able to break free from their socioeconomic status that they were born into or that they were engaged in, or they didn't. And it was just this mind-boggling thing that OECD dug into, because they were just like, this doesn't make sense. We have students walking into these classes, these highly skilled classes, current tech ed related, so on, that we are making sure that everybody walks away with the same skill set. Yet why are only some of the students moving on? Only some of them are actually using it. And it was the students who came from families that had the connections. And what that research that Nature found out was that students from low socioeconomic households have connections to other adults in other low socioeconomic careers. And students in high socioeconomic households have connections to adults in other high socioeconomic careers. Now, if a student from a high socioeconomic household makes friends with a student in a low socioeconomic household, they can actually bring them out and move them up socioeconomic class. And I think when I try to translate this for others, I think the reality is, as a parent of teenage kids, if you would have a teenager say, hey, come over and hang out at my house, come over to the house. And as adults, we're like, oh my gosh, what do we say so they don't shut us out or slam a door or, anything? What kind of classes do you enjoy? What are you doing this summer? Do you have a plan? Are you going to college? Are you going to go? What kind of career are you thinking about? And if there's hesitation, as adults, we like to be helpful. Well, let me introduce you to someone, or have you thought about this? Or I know there's an opening. Let me connect you. Without that step, we are missing the opportunity. And so we are educating so hard in our contained classrooms. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. If we're not connecting students with an adult in a career path, then we are missing an opportunity to connect students with that potential career. You cannot be what you cannot see. You cannot achieve something that seems so far out of reach and you have no idea how to get it. We need people who are willing to say, let me help you. Let me help get your foot in the door. Let me introduce you to somebody. And then as I introduce you, they will introduce you to their networks. We, I'm sure, have experienced people who have opened doors for us, and that is critical. And we sometimes forget that not everybody comes from a privileged household. And if we're not making efforts in our schools and in our colleges, because this happens at the college level too, we assume that because they've made the entrance that they have all the connections that they need. Not true. So we have to be intentional. And what's the harm in that? Here's what we're learning, and this is what it means in the real world, like bridging that connection. And when we think about the entire continuum, the awareness to the exploration to the experience level, is we need to have all of those opportunities for students. How can you ever pursue a potential career path if you don't ever know? And some of the research that OECD has dug into is that students are still thinking about careers from the 19th and 20th centuries. Why? Because unless we are introducing it into our classrooms, unless we are bridging the connections for opportunities, who are they gaining the information from? The adults in their household who graduated in what year and who had access to what careers. So we get so frustrated that students don't dream about these careers. They have no idea. It is everybody's problem. It is our problem that we are not intentionally bridging what it is that we're learning to real world connections and careers. It is the problem that businesses aren't more willing to open their doors and define that connection. And part of it is how we've set up our systems that we don't allow those conversations. We don't allow that time to bridge that. But I'm going to go back to a really hard point is if we know that social capital is the determining factor in whether a student will take what they learned in the classroom and actually use it and apply it later on, then if we're not doing that, are we okay with the fact that we are just shutting the door on students who need it? Are we okay with the fact that we are just contributing to systemic progression and nothing else but whatever you have access to before you walk in the door? Are we okay with the fact that we know that there's students in our classroom who have lost hope and we're not willing to make the effort to change that? I'm not. I feel like this is my personal calling. And I know that you talked about the seasons at the beginning. I don't know that my personal passion and my drive and my purpose here right now on earth has shifted. It is my responsibility to provide hope for those who don't have somebody, to provide access for those who don't, and to bridge the gap in understanding that what we're doing isn't enough. And it's not because we're bad people. It's because we don't know. We're stuck in the everyday components, but what we need to do to get there isn't complicated. It doesn't have to be this complex thing where now we're sending 100% of our students out for one type of work-based learning experience. It is bridging the gap and looking at the data.
What I'm hearing you say, obviously, is students can walk out with the same skills, but not even the same access.
Right.
And so I want to ask you this: well, what actually defines, in your opinion, or maybe some of the things that you've seen or people you work with, a high quality work-based learning program? Like, what does that look like to you?
Well, what kind of program are we talking about? So I'm going to talk about the difference maker to me is the mentorship between the adult in the profession and the student. Mm-hmm. So let's go with what I call the big four. I would say the most impactful four work-based learning experiences that are providing that easier transition. So apprenticeships, internships, employer-led projects, and school-based enterprises. And when we look at those programs, okay, so apprenticeships, we're not just creating an apprenticeship just to create an apprenticeship. Does it provide a wage that increases over time? The one that probably frustrates me the most are CNA apprenticeships. Mm-hmm. That's a 2-week test. Why are we creating an apprenticeship that's locking students into a career path instead of providing opportunities for vertical advancement over time? In a short period of time, right? Not that you can't become a lifelong CNA, but the apprenticeship model is intended for this high skill, high wage, and there's a limit to that, right? So I would say it's what is the end goal? What is the progression for that? Internships is we're actually building out opportunities for students. We're creating experiences that can go in a portfolio that would be something, a resume type of builder. It's not tasks. It's not getting coffee. It's not watering plants. It's not wiping down tables. It is actually something that a student could not get on their own. Now, if you're transforming existing opportunities in your community, that's fine. You could have somebody at a grocery store, but if they're a cashier and their goal is in business, it better look more like business. Like you need to be building and understanding markup or supply chain, or they're doing advertising, or they're doing some sort of human resource management. Anything but what would a student would be able to access on their own, going back to what I said at the beginning. When it comes to those employer-led projects, so the projects with local businesses or community organizations, it's not just completing the project, but it's actually taking the effort to connect more about the career. So even though they've asked you to do something and you present on it, building in that understanding and connection of what their career is and maybe some interests related to that. And then the last one is school-based enterprises. When I say the big four, that one is not just everybody's trying to figure it out on their own. We're actually connecting in with a local entrepreneur. It can be in the same exact industry or a related industry or something completely different, because there's something you can learn from everybody. And I can tell you that as an entrepreneur. But it's somebody who's providing advice and that connection for students, for them to see and know somebody in the actual community. And obviously, I think personally, on a side note, I think the best way that you can build your school-based enterprise is with an incubator model, with the idea that at some point in time, there'll be a student who graduates who wants to come back and actually put that in the community full time. And then you can move on to a different school-based enterprise. But there's so many other experiences. They're all related to work. I know sometimes they're labeled as career connected learning. Spoiler alert, in the book, I actually say, like, it's the same thing. Like career connected learning and work-based learning, when you break down those three words, they're all the same. They mean all the same thing. They just created a duplicate term because some states have narrowly defined work-based learning and educators are frustrated. So they've created another term, which just creates confusion in the field. But we need to introduce students. So when you have guest speakers in, you don't just have them show up and have students ask questions. We're actually doing the full piece in the planning. We're preparing students ahead of time. We have clear expectations. We're asking them to reflect afterwards. What did this mean for you? When we build out a business tour, doing it with intentionality. Again, what are students doing before they go out? What happens when they're in there? Could you do a rotational model? I know on a group text, I know or maybe it was on LinkedIn, I was just like, what if we did this instead? Because I've heard a lot of complaints from businesses saying job shadows just take a lot of time and they're misused a lot of times. But if we would intentionally try to be more efficient with our time, we could do a combined job shadow tour model where students can see multiple stations. But I think it's coming back to the idea that work-based learning isn't just working. It is really about, it's based on aspects of work and helping students bridge the gap. I don't think there's anything wrong with having somebody from HR come and actually talk to your students and help them build out their resumes or provide feedback, or to do actual mock interviews with professionals before they go and interview for a position. What does that do? It provides students without the opportunity ahead of time to build out their skills and to get that feedback, because we know that if we remove that, what are we saying? Well, if you come from a house of privilege, good luck, you're on your own, you're going to do well. But if you don't, all you know are those part-time jobs that you can already get, which, what are those interviews? Show up, you're breathing, you have a social security number, and you're willing to come to work. Like, that's not a professional interview. We know that our professional interviews, depending on the career field, can be enormously taxing on you as a person, and you need to be prepared. So I don't know if that really fully answers the question, except that we need to think about it from a continuum standpoint and provide lots of opportunities, and not just in a handful of classes, not just right before you graduate, but we are providing opportunities throughout the student's academic career without forcing them to make a decision too early. Because if we're forcing that too early, what happens if they change their mind? Then what happens? Are they stuck? Can you imagine being stuck in a career at age 16? Like, you're just still trying to figure out life. Versus if your entire academic experience is about a coordinated opportunity in all your careers to experience on different degree and different levels, but it's a conversation as a school or as a college of what is happening where and how do we ensure that students aren't falling in between the cracks and they're not missing out? How do we ensure that we don't have a certain population that only gets access to these types of careers? How do we increase as many opportunities as possible as students begin to understand not only what their interests are, what their aptitudes, right, Brian? But also, how do they make money? Like, are these jobs actually going to pay a livable wage? How often are we signing off on the fact that, hey, I know you need to make money because of your family situation. Why don't we cut out you taking all these classes so you can go work at your part-time job? And are they happy when they're 25 because they've missed out on the access because they've been sent to go work? Have we missed out on opportunity? Yes, by not connecting them with a professional career that could provide a livable wage and help them move out of a situation that they feel trapped in. Have we missed an opportunity, or have we taken advantage of an opportunity to provide hope for our students?
We just want to give a shout out to our sponsor, YouScience Bright Path.
What we've learned about YouScience Bright Path, is that this tool is the best tool in order to help a kid or a young person or you, right? It really doesn't matter like your age, but you want to know what you're apt at and combine that with what you're interested in to pick a next step. I haven't seen a better option on the market, and that's why we love them. That's why they're one of our awesome sponsors.
My kids use it. So if you're going to ask me about an ed tech company and do you believe in it? I mean, I've used it with my two children, right? I have conversations with my own kids and talking about, okay, this is what you're good at. This is what you're interested in. Let's take a look at this. Let's take a look at all the options here and let's vet through them. And by the way, those options constantly update. I mean, how can you get more real time than that?
Right. I'm just waiting for them to add skydiving instructor into the mix. I don't know how you test for aptitudes on that. If they need help, I can help them.
You start with the individual in education. That's what we've been talking about in CTE all the time. Who are they? Who is the individual in front of you? And even in the internship programs that I've worked with, it really starts with the student. It doesn't say, you're good at math, you should go this way. That's the old traditional kind of way that we thought worked, but we also know that there's data out there that doesn't really work, right? So once a student knows who they are and kind of how they're wired to succeed, honestly, then you start to build from that. And that's the foundation. And what I like about YouScience Bright Path is really it doesn't stop there. It can create a plan, individualized plan. And for us in CTE, that really helps me as an educator and even a father understand how can I really take a look at different industries and different connections that I have or that are in our community or anywhere for that matter. I mean, we have these social networks that are business oriented. How can we help a student or again my own kids understand and connect directly with these people? And I mean, it's all here. It's right in the platform.
If you're interested in this, you want to learn more, we've got the link in the show notes. It's going to pop up on the screen. Check it out, learn more. They have demos. You can learn more about it, and we just love it. Peter and I, it's no secret. I mean, we have Jason Van Nuss to thank for our love of YouScience and this idea of understanding really who you are. But I'm not a product expert. I've taken the aptitudes. I've certainly dabbled in the software, but Brian, that's you. And so Kristy's talking about a lot of things that would make a really big difference. And there's got to be, we could have paper stacks of this, but there's probably a better way to kind of track some of this work and ideas of having students understand what they're good at, giving them opportunities. And so from your experience in working with YouScience and a work-based learning product, what are you hearing from teachers and whatnot of like how this is helping kids do some of those things that Kristy's talking about, the access.
Yeah, that's one of YouScience's biggest goals, is to help expose students to things that they didn't know, right? That they hadn't been exposed to, things that their cousins or their uncles or their parents did for a living, or something that was, a career from the 70s. One of the things that we do is with the aptitude assessment is match them to careers, and then show them that here there are these other careers that are outside of just the normal, like what you might call Sesame Street careers, right? Policemen's, doctor, accountants, and things like that. But there's other things like, HR and industrial manufacturing, robotics. These are all great things that a student might have an aptitude for. They just don't have any interest in it, So our work-based learning platform takes that one step further, takes it one step further to then take all of those students based on their career aptitudes and alignments and any certifications that they may have already taken in their CTE classes, and then align them with work-based learning opportunities that can help them take the next step. And it is partly apprenticeships and internships, but we also have work-based learning activities that are things like a career fair or the job shadow or a guest speaker. You can even go one step further to say, don't just show up at the career fair and wander around and see which tables have the best gifts, but but go to the career fair and say, specifically go to these tables. These ones are the ones that came out on your results that you might be interested in. Make sure that you see all of them, but these ones especially will apply to you, and help them do that at scale. So that's something that we're really excited about, to start to see those that longitudinal journey go from when students in middle school taking their very first aptitude assessment until they get up to graduation, and then where they continue on from there.
I love Sesame Street. That was awesome. By the way, I wrote that down. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
That's what I love. I love about these conversations you're picking up, and obviously, if you watch, Allie and I are always writing stuff down. So yeah, Brian, that's that. You have these systems and tools, and when you started working on work-based learning at YouScience, I always want to ask, because there's always like Kristy said, some people get into a rotation where things keep coming back. Were there any problems like you've heard that kept coming up from schools or maybe users or even within the work world that you're connecting, because you have to build those two pillars, and it's a difficult build. I've played around with some different platforms and different things like that, but yeah, what were some of those problems that kept coming up, and how are you guys looking at that differently now?
Two things that come to mind right away is that I mentioned it before, is that they just have spreadsheets and paperwork and printed papers and ink signed documents all over the place, where they have to either, call that in for reporting and ask all of their teachers to send them a spreadsheet that hopefully it's correct and formatted properly so that they can copy it into the spreadsheet that they can send to the state, something like that. Having all of that everywhere, our software puts that into one single place, and then it also attaches it to all of the rest of BrightPath. The other thing that we heard from work-based learning coordinators especially was just how exhausting it is to keep up with all of their employers, right? To see, did I talk to them already? Did someone on my staff talk to them already? When was the last time that I checked in with them? Are they not taking any new interns this school year? Do I need to check in with them again? Maybe I need to go and drive in to visit them. So we also have like a contact history, like almost a CRM for employers in the software to help them keep track of all of that. And then all of their staff, all of their team can use that same software to be able to keep track of that. Somebody referred to it as pitch fatigue. They're like, I just get so tired of trying to explain to these employers the goodness that can come from the community and trying to tell them how great of an opportunity is. But not only that, but then when they win them over and they get into an engagement with that employer, to keep them happy and make sure that they send the right students there so that the students match with the employers and the employers match with the students. Because the same administrator had said that, she said it's not only important to expose kids to what they might not have learned before, what they might want to do, but also what they don't want to do, that they might have been interested in this. And then after going through a work-based learning activity, to say, oh, I'm actually, I'm not interested in that. I'm going to keep looking. I'm going to keep, maybe next year I'll take a different work-based learning activity somewhere in the realm of where I'm at, but in a different direction.
We need kids to get exposed to things that they think they like, things they think they don't like. And like I've said it before, I didn't even know engineering was a thing. And YouScience results said I should have been an engineer.
There's still time, Alli. There's still time.
I do engineering in my work. And but it's like you just, to Kristy's point, you cannot be what you cannot see. Like I didn't see it, and I didn't even know it was a thing until I was like post college. And it's a real thing though. And talk about. Luckily, I had other avenues for social capital, like in social mobility. I wasn't like limited, in what I was able to pursue, but that's privilege. That's not like that's my other connections and resources that I had through family, friends, college, networking on my own, stuff like that. But like if I had known what I was really apt at, because I couldn't really speak to that when I was a high schooler. I just think of how like every lens would have changed. And I see kids, man, if you posting, I don't know if it's like a new trend or something, but there are kids posting on LinkedIn that are like raving about like how knowing what they're apt at is changing the game for them. And I am just like, I don't like the algorithm feeds it to me, and I love reading every single one because to Kristy's point, like these kids are like, think of like if I'm seeing it, you might be seeing it, other people might be seeing it, and then they could connect with so much. I know it's not work-based learning, but it's a huge driver for it, and could lead to opportunities that they aren't even aware of.
We talk to so many people who say after we give them the YouScience pitch or after they take the aptitude assessment, just like you did, and see their results, they without fail, they always come back and say, gosh, where was this when I was in college, or where was this when I was in high school? And it's for that exact reason. I was no different back, I don't know, quite a long time ago when I graduated from high school. Jurassic Park had just come out, and I wanted to they were making dinosaurs on screen and making them real through CGI, but I didn't know what it took to get there. So when I got to college, I told them in one way or another that I wanted to make Jurassic Park. So they put me into a bunch of art classes, and I am not an artist. And I was like, well, I guess I don't want to do this. But looking back, what they should have done is to figure out how to get me into a CS track, because that's where I would have been the most successful. It took me way too long to figure that out. And so just like everyone else, I wish I had YouScience and an aptitude assessment back when I had graduated.
Yeah. I think that when I think about YouScience and I think about work-based learning and I think about career planning, and this is why I love YouScience, and this is why I'm so excited to work alongside and partner with YouScience, is that they're the whole package. Like we have always seen career planning as the separate thing over here that the counselor can do if they have time for 10 minutes a year. Not effective, right? We know it has to be embedded across the entire academic experience. We know that work-based learning provides that real connection for students to experience something that they think that they're interested in, and having those aptitudes really helps. So to me, YouScience is like the whole package. And this is how we not only empower students and families, but it's how we provide concerted effort and support in a situation where we have limited staffing, we have limited time and capabilities, and it's hard for us all to come together and help every single student. But if we have the data, if we have the support system, if we have this effort together, it's so much more impactful and provides so many more opportunities for us to be able to help fill those gaps in those high wage, high skills, create opportunities that help our communities thrive.
You've talked about, Kristy, there's a certain number of interactions that would really benefit a student K through 12. Mm-hmm. And I'm still hanging on to that stat or whatnot that you shared, the research about high school is the pivotal moment. Mm-hmm. And if people have missed that, in this episode, just go back and rewind, don't even finish the episode, just go back, because I'm just thinking about this in terms of what happens if we don't get this work right? And please share a little bit about like what you've learned about with the research in terms of like tracking and the data in terms of the number of interactions kids need from K through 12.
So there's a lot there. I'll say that the research it depends on who you dive into with the research. Again, I'm going to go back with what OECD has says, because that's international, looking at impoverished countries and very much affluent countries. And they're saying 84 and 84 intentional interactions. And I think when we hear that number, it can be overwhelming. But remember, we're not saying 84 internships per kid. We're saying 84 intentional interactions. So I think if you think about the entire academic career, and if we're intentional about it, again, intentional, we're not forcing students to make decisions. But let's say, and I've said this before, we have fire safety week in elementary. And they come in and they do stop, drop, and roll. They talk about, we're not scary people. If you see us, we're here to help you. This is what we do. What if they spend 5 minutes talking about why they love their job? What if before they came, their teacher read a book on firefighters? It doesn't mean we're asking 5, 6, 7-year-olds to make decisions about firefighting, but that kind of stuff sticks with you. I mean, they're already getting to climb on the truck. They're already getting that interaction. And at some point in time, a student may return to that idea later on in their career, and they had that experience. They had that intentionality. I might also say that with education. We're not intentional about our own career path and our own career field. We already have older students reading to younger students because there's something that you can learn when you read aloud to a younger student, and then have a younger student read aloud to you. Why not have some sort of teacher leader come and talk to those older students about what it's like to be a teacher? We can also utilize our career fairs. They should be changed into more of like a career expo, hands-on booth experience. But again, if it's not a free-for-all, I hope you go check these out. But it's part of an intentionally designed support system with a class. We're going to do some research on who's coming. I want you to build a plan. You need to talk to at least 3 different people and interact with at least 3, or maybe we say 10. But when we start talking about all these things and they're intentionally embedded, 84 isn't that far-fetched. And 84 doesn't mean we have 84 real leads for each student. It means we're giving students opportunities to change their mind, to know that things like different opportunities can change, especially as they progress in their career. They may decide, I went into this and I really like this, but now I remember this person. I have a good connection. I'm connected with them. I'm going to reach back out. Could I forge a new path? Could I build an opportunity or even a business to meet a specific need? Now, when we get it wrong, which we have gotten it wrong, the stuff that breaks my heart. And I've already shared with you where we track in students who are needing to make money for their families, and we think we're doing them a favor to go work your part-time job, but we've actually eliminated opportunity and future opportunity for those students instead of taking the time to connect them with a high-wage career opportunity that pays, right? When students who maybe struggle with school, what do? We say, oh, well, now you're not going to get to take these fun classes. We're going to bulk up and make you take multiple of these classes that you hate and that you struggle with. And we're going to remind you that you're not good at it. And not intentionally because we're mean in education, but it's that constant reminder. Now I have to take 2 of this class to make up for a class I failed, and I hate this class, and I'm not getting these opportunities. Or for these last minute, like, you know what, you're not good in school. How about the trades? We've undermined the trades. Like the trades is advanced math, and there's advanced business opportunities, but we've minimized that and said it's for a particular population instead of actually asking the student and looking into what are you good at and how do we build out opportunities for you? Or I've seen this too with sometimes our students who really struggle and need documented supports in the form of like an IEP or a 504, that we may reduce them down to service careers. You can go into customer service. Is that even what they're interested in? There's so many opportunities if we look at the positives of a student and what their skills are instead of always reducing them to their deficits. And I don't care what your learning focus and ability is. At the end of the day, that's what we should be looking at. What are you good at? What are you interested in? And how do we find something that works for you and fits with that interest level and with where you're headed, while also keeping in mind, I'm going to go back to those good jobs. Not all jobs are good jobs. There are a lot of them out there that students have access to that will never pay a livable wage that will allow them to leave their family home. Why would we ever minimize and reduce student opportunity to that? That's why we have to get involved. That's why we have to stop thinking about what's easiest and what makes sense for right now, but to be thinking about, will the student be happy when they're 25? 26, 27, 35? Will they have opportunities and connections to make a career path change? Or have we inherently limited and shut the door when they have needed us the most? That's what I worry about. That's what drives me in this field, is because we can do better. And it's not because educators don't care. There's a lot of things that are creating these barriers, but a lot of it too is opening up our minds and understanding that not connecting students to real people in real careers in a variety of different engagement levels is limiting our students. It is creating this system of the privileged will have access and those who don't will not. And the reality is, in order for our country and our communities to continue to grow economically, we have to connect more humans with high skilled jobs, which means they can need those connections because they don't exist. Why would we continue to set up our system to have a driving population that at some point in time in their adult lives, they're going to feel stuck? They can't just drop everything and go back to college to get a degree or a certificate at a community college or whatever that may be in order to access a career that still seems out of reach. They don't even understand it. Why would we continue down that system when we can be doing something now? And our small things all add up to something great.
So many pieces in there. Thank you for sharing that. And I saw you, and people, you can scroll backwards and see you're passionate about this. I can see how when something goes wrong and we're not taking this seriously, it really, I honestly, I just want to, give you kudos, Kristy, because you can see the emotion in you. And that's what I love about doing this work. This is legacy work. This isn't just work for, all right, well, let's just make a paycheck and move. Like, we're actually trying to build and change a system here and disrupt education, which I love. Sounded a little bit there, Alli, about some of that feedback from, like Dr. Sandra Adams said, about how the feedback loop can be negative or positive, and she said that on a previous episode too. So you're right there. So Brian, I want to shift here because we do have tools. We do have things here that we can integrate and work with our students to actually connect that full journey. Now, look, I don't think there's ever going to be any sort of technology that's going to do it all. We need people there. We need interactions, those 84 intentional interactions, but there are different ways that we can do that using technology. So I wanted to kind of like, okay, give us an example of somewhere or something that you've created, your team created, and or like an example of a student or a learner going through from aptitudes to real opportunities. How does that work on a platform that you're obviously working with?
Talking to administrators and work-based learning coordinators, well, I shouldn't say that, not just work-based learning coordinators, but teachers and administrators in general for any of the YouScience Bright Path products. They all say, that they know their kids or that they know some things about them, but they wish that they could know more. So they usually have a good idea of which students are that they have in mind to send to which type of work-based learning opportunities. But then there's the rest of the student population that they might not have interacted with, or that they might not have had a chance to meet with. And those are the students who we want to expose to help the teacher or the administrator find them, dig deeper in that student pool to be able to pick those students out and say, oh, on paper, it looks like you would be good at this work-based learning activity, or you would be a good candidate for this work-based learning activity. Let's see what we can do to get you started and see if you're interested in something like that. But I think that's one of the biggest differentiators of our work-based learning product, is that it has the connection back to all of their certifications that they might have taken, CTE, some of the more fun classes that you're talking about, Kristy. And then of course, all of their aptitudes and interests both together to get into a deeper look into that student population.
I mean, I just think we can make this work easier. And, like Kristy, I have a vivid memory of a conversation of you and I walking across, oh my gosh, what was the name of that beautiful like garden area that we were at in Nashville? I'm forgetting, Opryland,
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
And, you were just talking about how, like this work, like, can be done, and it can be done so much easier if we use data. Like not unlike hopes and prayers, something like that. And I just remember it didn't exactly click then, but I just think that one of the reasons like you're in this work is to make it better for everyone. And I know you care about, like, it's not just 84 interactions. It's not about the big four for you. It's about the whole system working together. And you've seen a lot of systems that don't work. And so yeah, I guess for me, to kind of round this out, if you're thinking about, you have two different students and with the same skills, but like only one has real connections, right? Like who actually has the opportunity. Like, what does that say about how we're designing education?
It means that we have students who are falling through the cracks. And when I think about data, and I actually have a whole chapter in the CTE book, which is a little spicy about data and the reality. Yeah. Because here's the thing, like I've talked data, especially when I was at the state level, we would look at data, we would dissect data, and people get stuck on like, well, how do I make the numbers work and just fudge what is actually happening? And that's never okay. And that's honestly where I'm like, that's ethically where I draw the line. Like you have to be student centered. You have to, at the end of the day, say, is this benefiting students or is this doing nothing different than what we've been doing since the beginning of time, right? But when I think about what students have and what they don't have, we oftentimes will latch on to those one-offs. Well, this one student, look at their journey, look at what they have done. And those are fantastic stories. And we do need those stories to help inspire participation and expand opportunity. But what does your data say? I think back to one of our first national conferences we had for work-based learning and we had a keynote speaker and was talking about like all these amazing opportunities. 10% of their graduating class had that. So then does it mean as much? Like, yes, that's important. Yes, that's valuable. No, you can't have 100% of your students doing this one, because anybody who's taught in a high school building understands not every student's ready for the same experience at the same time. But what we can do is diversify our opportunities. That's why I say the big four. Those are the biggest impactful four for creating those mentorships that are going to surpass the graduation stage. What is happening and where? Who is having access and who doesn't have access? And then our next question is, what needs to happen to ensure that they have the access? And then when you start looking at what's happening and where, start looking at individual students. And this was some of the data that at the state level we started dissecting, and we found out that some students were having the exact same experience 3 or 4 times. I mean, you can only go on the same tour like more than once and you're like, oh my goodness, this is the same thing. Have we just limited opportunity? 100%. Now on paper, it looks great, right? But it's not doing what it's intended to do. And that's why we always have to look at the data. And again, this is why it's so important to embed these experiences into our courses. Don't make these a sign up and hope you have time and hope you feel comfortable and hope you're confident to join. Make this part of the learning experience. Show the rigor and the relevance of what they're learning and why they're learning it and who's connected to it. Just because you have a classroom full of students talking to a professional doesn't mean they're all going to call upon that professional, but you've at least opened the door and provided the opportunity. But when we tie this stuff to courses, then looking at the data becomes easier. Imagine now a counselor who has 10 minutes every year with their students, right? and they can pull up and they can see the experience that they have in the types of careers and then pull in that YouScience data on top of that, that's a robust conversation versus a blind conversation of hypothetically, what do you think that you want to do? Again, this takes the effort of all to support individual students holistically throughout their academic career, but it makes a tremendous difference. And when we start dissecting that data, we can dig into even what employers are participating and which ones are not. Are we overtaxing the same ones, or are we not taking advantage of other ones? Have we looked outside of what our typical circle of employers might be to access new opportunities and show what's possible to maybe bring that career into our community because we don't have it? So I think when we go back to the data, and that's what I usually say, what does your data say? I know this is what you remember in your classroom, but what does your data say? What are your students actually doing? Of all the students that you had in your work-based learning program, are only 3 actually getting professional experiences, and you're just ignoring the fact that everybody else is just working a part-time job? That's a problem. And what are you going to do about it? Like, I think that's the biggest thing, is not knowing is one thing, but once you know, what's your next step to make it better? What do you need for support? What's your plan? What comes next? What's long term? Because we want to make that systemic change for students, but it has to start somewhere. And it always starts with the data. What's happening and where?
100%. Again, I told you, Alli, we're going to get a new work-based learning masterclass with Kristy today. It's going to be awesome. So, no, this is amazing. I really love this. The foundation of all of this, which I didn't even really realize until I ran into Jason, and then we were introduced to YouScience, was, that foundation of that aptitude. We can individualize learning now so much easier and gather data and then build around that, and then get to a point to where our students are actually leaving school with skills and a network. And that's super exciting for me, because I I was in that Sesame Street career area, but we're launching people from that. No disrespect to Sesame Street. I love Sesame Street, but for real, that was such a great saying there. One last question for you, Brian. So where is like work-based learning heading in the eyes of the ed tech world and YouScience? Like where do you think this is going to go next over the next few years?
Well, of course, just like everyone else's conversations nowadays is around AI, to where,
Mhm.
everything that we've talked about today, the student will take the aptitude assessment. They might have taken some certifications. Then the teacher or the coordinator puts that together with the student, and then puts that together with the employer. I would think that, somewhere here in the very near future, all of that will start to come together as one big pool of data that can be called upon to where a student can ask very normal questions of the software to say, I don't know, like just have a conversation of, I don't know, I don't really know what I want to be, or I think I want to be this. Then the software could respond with something to say, like, other students that we've seen in this massive data, this massive data set that we have, other students have gone on to do things like this. This might be something that you're interested in. What do you think? And then back and forth, right? We've all used the chat GPT and things like that, but that type of interaction directly from the student, I think that's the direction that we're headed very, very quickly.
No lie at all there. So, Alli, I got to throw out quick. What are your final thoughts here? There's so many.
There are so many. One, I'm pretty sure Big Bird is a type of chicken. It's called a frizzle, or a Polish, because of the top of the head if you're a chicken person.
Amazing.
And but I think for me, when I'm thinking about this whole episode, it's bringing me back to like the different seasons of my life, and that quote that I shared at the beginning from James Clear, and just like how important the season of high school is, and that we get it right. And in order to disrupt education, we like have to put the time, the resources into our students and give them those experiences. I'd like the research is clear, like Kristy's expertise here and lifetime of work at this point, it's just going to continue, is sharing this is what we need to focus on education. It shouldn't feel like a big shift, but it's like, I just know when I was teaching, the less I focused on tests and the more I just focused on like helping students see how anything in school related to anything outside of school, like those were the biggest shifts. And it's like, I won't say like throw the standards out the window, but like maybe we need to reevaluate like how we address those standards in a much bigger way in 2026 than maybe what we've been doing. That would be my challenge for listeners and those listening to the podcast, and really consider how you can implement work-based learning, career-connected learning, whatever kind of learning that's outside of the school sooner rather than later.
Right. I mean, if there's one thing that this conversation makes clear, it's basically that work-based learning it's not an add-on. And I know like Kristy's no, it's not. It's connection to people, opportunity, and direction. And that's what I really love about both of you have talked about, really giving our kids clarity and confidence no matter where they come from and no matter who they are, and then actually giving them that direction and ways to connect. So we're actually giving students real opportunities and not just preparing them on paper and spreadsheets. So with that, I want to thank you, Kristy Volesky, Brian Hansen, for being here with us. We really appreciate you guys. So thank you for hanging out with us and sharing your expertise.
Thank you for
It's
having
been great.
us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. So if you want to check out Kristy Volesky, to be Volesky Consulting, we'll put all her information. Brian is from YouScience Brightpath. We love YouScience. Honestly, just some amazing work that you're doing there. So thank you. And for Big Bird, who is now a chicken, and Alli Dahl, I'm Peter Hostrawser. Hey guys, we'll catch you next time on the Disrupt Education podcast. We'll see you later. Thanks for tuning in to the Disrupt Education podcast. If this episode sparked an idea, challenged your thinking, or helped you see education differently, well, that's exactly why we're here. We're highlighting real stories and bold ideas shaping the future of learning. A quick thank you to our sponsor, YouScience Brightpath, the next generation platform helping students make personalized decisions as they move from education to career. If you're serious about connecting students to real opportunity, head to youscience.com/disrupt education-podcast. Request a demo and let them know you heard about YouScience right here on the Disrupt Education podcast. For more episodes and clips and ways to connect, you can always visit disrupteducationpodcast.com. I'm Peter Hostrawser. Keep disrupting. We'll see you next time on the podcast.